Well, it's the interview that appears to be creating a firestorm, and you saw it first on Fox Business Network. So it's not the 1,100 that Donald Trump mentioned. You say it's more like 800 in total.
It's 800. That's what the figure is. Donald Trump and Governor Pence are taking credit for 350 jobs that are research and development jobs that were staying here in Indianapolis from the start.
All right, that was Carrier Union boss Chuck Jones claiming that President-elect Trump is taking credit for saving jobs at Carrier that were never leaving in the first place. Then Donald Trump firing back, telling Jones that he ought to stop yapping about union jobs and just start saving jobs. And back and forth and back and forth. And here we be. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil. Give it up to Charles Payne, Charlie Gasparino. Good to see this lady in person, Emily Jashinsky, along with Ben Stein. Glad to have him back. And Adam Lushinsky. We have Dagan McDowell, who did her usual great job sub-hosting on Bulls and Bears. Kennedy is out today. All right, so Charles Payne, what is being argued here is it's not 1,100 jobs, it's more like 700 jobs or whatever. My bottom line is it's 700 plus jobs that wouldn't have been there had Donald Trump not intervened.
It's nuts. Of all the fights to pick with Donald Trump, the amount of jobs you saved from going to Mexico a couple of weeks before Christmas, which is what unions used to do, what we're supposed to do until they got too greedy and they started to rip off the companies that they supported, produce products that were too expensive for the consumer, and saw their membership rolls decline by 80%. That's what you were supposed to do, Chuck. He's doing your job. So maybe you're going to find a lot of things to quibble about. This was the wrong one.
Okay, so you do not appear to agree with Chuck. All right, Emily, what's your take on this?
So I think, first of all, the way Donald Trump is talking to Chuck is probably the way a lot of people across the country have wanted to talk to Chuck for a long time. And the reason we're having this conversation is because we now have a president who has experience on the business side. And that's not something that a lot of politicians can say in this country. And it's working out well so far. So let's see what happens in the future. But for now, I think it was great. I think it was kind of funny.
Charlie Gasparino, I saw this story evolve, and you and I were talking about this. Sure. He was a great guest. Chuck Jones was a fantastic guest. And he wasn't really excessively whining. But I think then he went back to his people and said, you're not sounding angry enough.
Yeah.
And followed the interview. It got worse. So I do think that everyone goes back to their base or whatever. No, you got to sound angry. You got to sound crazier.
Yeah, I mean, the quibble about, a couple hundred jobs that, that Donald was off by is like absurd, given the fact that at least 700 jobs have been saved. If you really want to go after Donald, and no union president would ever do this, it was his possibly excessive use of corporate welfare to keep the Carrier employees in there, which I think is open game for anybody. I mean, basically, Carrier stayed not just for a lot of reasons, but there was a component of corporate welfare. They also stayed.
Well, then if it's corporate welfare, lots of states have it.
Right,
$7
sure.
million over 10 years.
And it never works. And it's basically...
Well, it kept them there, right?
Well, now it did, but who knows what's going to happen in the future.
Fair enough. So what do you make of that, Ben Stein?
I make it the fact that Gaspo is exactly right. Protectionism, trying to use government's heavy hand to keep industry somewhere, is going to work for a while. It makes headlines. It's not going to work for a long time. The free movement of jobs and capital is very unfortunate for people who lose their jobs. They should be retrained. They should be compensated. But the idea that we're going to become a protectionist nation is a very bad idea, and it scares me a lot. I wish Mr. Trump would think about it a little tiny bit more.
All right, well, I disagree with that. But, Adam, the one thing I see in this is that what's so wrong about a president, let alone a president-elect, making a pitch for jobs and doing nothing any differently, we're told, than a lot of these other pitches to remind them, I'm going to cut regulations, I'm going to cut taxes. You'd be crazy to want to leave when I'm about to do this, and maybe down the road, if you still want to after all that, go ahead.
The way you framed it just now, I think, is totally appropriate, Neil. What could be crazy about it is this notion of a president of the United States doing a onesie and twosie with individual companies and threatening them or coercing them.
Good point.
We want to be very sure that that doesn't happen.
All right. By the way, as you're saying that, Gasparino is saying good point. So just so you know, and you are on record, Charlie Gasparino and you are on the same page, along with Ben Stein.
Well,
this isn't the first time.
Think about about the whole
It might be the first time he's agreed with me. It wouldn't be the
all right,
first
fair
time
enough.
I
But
agreed
think
with
about the
him.
whole week, Neil. He went from carrier, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world, but I don't like the use of corporate welfare because taxpayers are subsidizing the corporate welfare. Then he goes to Rexnord.
By the way, taxpayers have been doing that to keep businesses in their
and
states.
it never really works.
Yeah.
New York City's been the king. New York's been the king of it. It's like it's horrible. But let me point. Then he went to Rexnord and attacked them and tanked their stock for a little bit. Then he went to Boeing, attacked
Rexnord
them.
was a bearings manufacturer,
Right.
also
Who
in
wants it?
Indiana.
Then he went to
They
Boeing because he didn't like the
Well, they all
price or
see what
something.
happens to one. I see your point, and then others want to follow suit. I do see that. I do see that. What I think is that for him to be criticized for trying to do everything in his power, let alone as a president-elect, to save jobs is not a bad thing.
Listen, I don't disagree with the merits of what Ben, Charlie, and Adam are saying. I do
Don't
think
give Ben
I
Charlie.
don't
This is a
think-
very
I
good
don't-
day.
Give them
I
A very
think
good
that
day.
we should put an asterisk on
Four
this.
against one.
No, I do
Four
think we should put an asterisk on this one this time.
Yes.
The president-elect made a specific promise to the folks at Carrier, but more importantly, I think he's trying to energize middle America who don't understand necessarily or care about the economic theories that we're talking about right now, but they want their jobs for Christmas. And I think it's working. I think the big news this week is the amazing surge in consumer confidence, the amazing surge
And
in
you know
economic
why there's a
confidence.
surge in consumer confidence? Because a lot of
things
people
like this.
Because of things like this. I mean, I think a lot of people reading this, whether you're on the right or the left, they're reading into this. This is a guy who's going to do his damnness to make sure American jobs thrive.
Well, and this is what I love, is that we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We haven't
you
been
agree with
talking-
me?
Of course I agree.
You
with
know we're in a minority in this communist panel.
We wouldn't,
Right.
we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Not to infinity. Go ahead.
We wouldn't be having this conversation about American workers over the past 8 years of President Obama. It's just not something we were talking about. And
Say that again.
President-elect
Say
Trump,
that again. We wouldn't have this conversation if the underpinnings weren't what they were,
Well,
given the president that's in there right now.
Okay, let's make her point. President Obama was the king of corporate welfare, and all these liberal Democrats are the kings of this.
Why is it corporate welfare
Because
to incentivize the company to stay
okay,
here?
We will transfer basically taxpayer money to you if you stay a couple extra years.
$7 million over 10
It never
years to a
works.
concern.
It never.
$700,000
But
a year.
Listen, I'm glad they're staying. but
Four
I'm saying-
factory jobs.
Look at the
Yeah,
economic.
there's one more important
Look
point.
at the record where this is used. New York State, a basket case. California, a basket case. And by the way,
Texas, not a basket
They don't
case.
do it.
Texas
No,
is not a
no.
basket case. It incentivizes.
No.
What
Maybe
does
they do it
You know
less.
how
What do you think is
you know
drawing
how
them
they-
in? The 120-degree summer temperature?
You know how they incentivize people in Texas?
The cactus.
State flower.
Low taxes, less regulation.
All right, Ben Stein, I don't know. Yeah, you're equating this, I guess,
Sir.
with what Barack Obama did with Solyndra and solar power companies, right?
No, it is the same government's heavy hand trying
No,
to
it is
control
not,
the
and you
free
know it,
market.
and you know it.
That is, yes, it is.
You
Yes,
just hate
no, I
Donald
do
Trump.
not.
You
No, it
hate
is
Donald
government's
Trump.
heavy hand.
You never liked him in the
I
first
don't
place,
hate
and now
Donald
you're
Trump.
getting childish
I
about
like
it.
Donald. I like Donald Trump very much. I
No, you
voted
don't.
for him. I've lost many friends here in Hollywood because I
Yeah.
voted for him. But I think he's made a mistake here. Free movement of goods and capital and workers is a big, big part of what makes us a rich country.
All right, but part of it is your contempt for Donald Trump.
No, it is not contempt for
Yes, it
him. I
is.
think he's great.
Yay, capitalism.
Yay, capital.
You're goading the wrong person
Adam, I'll
here.
give you the final word on the subject.
Well, the one thing we haven't talked about is that the real enemy here is automation. That's why these jobs are going away. Donald Trump's not going to be able to do anything about it. The unions won't be able to do anything about it, and so on.
You know, sadly, the money that they're getting from the taxpayers are going to invest in automation.
Bingo!
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
That's why it's
I
four
don't know
against
what
two.
God you prayed to. All right. Meanwhile, isn't this rich? This one really blew me away. And this, I don't know. After the break, I have to ask kind of about it. Lawmakers in Portland, Oregon, are passing a new tax, want to at least, on the rich, specifically telling CEOs that if you make a lot more, you have to pay a lot more. But could that hurt a lot more Americans in the process? We hear this one after this.
Today on Forbes on Fox, the White House still bashing President-elect Trump for taking a call from Taiwan's president, who's our friend. But what about when President Obama reportedly reached out to two of our enemies? Where was the outrage then? Plus, with new warnings about repealing and delaying Obamacare, the Forbes gang has the fix we can make right now that'll put you in charge. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Live from America's News headquarters, hello, I'm Greg Jarrett. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani making it official, bowing out of consideration for the post of Secretary of State in the new Trump administration. Mr. Giuliani addressing the issue earlier on Fox and Friends.
He had good choices. My objective in joining the campaign was never to get a job. It was the last thing in my mind. It was for my country.
President-elect Trump calling Mr. Giuliani an extraordinarily talented and patriotic American. He always appreciates his dedication to the campaign and for his wise counsel. Defense Secretary Ash Carter announcing the deployment of 200 additional American troops to Syria, aimed at training local fighters to take on ISIS. This latest increase bringing the total number of U.S. troops on the ground to roughly 500. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now back to Cavuto on Business.
If you thought that class warfare was over after the Trump election, think again, because in Portland, Oregon, the city council are just passing a law slapping up to a 25% surcharge tax on CEOs, making a lot more than the median pay of their workers. You have to get knee-deep in the details. I don't have the time or interest to do that. But the fact is here, it's just weird. Emily, what do you make of this? I mean, should that be done?
Two things here. First of all, what I love about this story is that they're not redistributing anything to workers. They're redistributing the money to the Portland city government. So the tax money is going into the city's general fund based on the stipulations of the law. And second of all, if you want to incentivize companies to retain top talent and to attract top talent, it's the worst way to do it. If you want Portlandians to keep their great jobs, not the way to go about it. But I also like that they think they're redistributing it, but it's redistributing it to the government.
I probably should have gotten into those weeds because I didn't realize that. But do you think, Adam, that that is a bad idea or a good idea?
Well, we just, as you said, Neil, I mean, class warfare is here to stay. We have an incoming president who won office by fighting class warfare. I don't think this will be particularly effective.
Class warfare, not fighting it.
I think sort of the country agrees we have rampant income inequality. So
no,
they're
that's
taking
not what I
a
asked.
stab
Do you
at
agree
fixing
with
it.
this, with what they're doing in Portland?
I think it's harmless because it's going to
like
affect
it or
like
not?
3 people,
You
as far
like
as
it
I
or
can
not?
tell. I don't love it, no.
Okay. Ben Stein.
I hate it. I hate any government attempt to impose equality by the heavy hand of government. That leads to the guillotine. I mean, obviously, as my good friend up in the northwestern U.S. said, or I guess that's San Francisco, it said it's trivial. It's going to affect 3 people. But the sad truth is, once we start down that path of government-imposed equality, the end of it is
But
forced.
Ben, are you against progressive
harm,
taxation?
seriously forced. No. I think progressive taxation is fine, but that's not the same as imposing a tax on people purely because it's unequal. We want something other than equality. Equality means a Bolshevik Soviet system where everybody is repressed except the top party bosses. We want to have a progressive tax system, yes, indeed. But we do not want to say to people, you're successful, we're going to chop your head off.
But can you put a number to it? Can you put like a 10 times, 100 times what the top guy makes versus his worker?
I cannot. I
The whole thing is absurd. I mean, let's be real clear here. This is the guillotine. This is fascism. I mean, that's where we're going here. It is literally.
Why is it the guillotine? You can always move. You don't have to have your head
overreacting.
double
They usually catch you before you're
Before
trying
you-
to
and then
run
they
out.
take
and then they
your
cut
head
your
off.
head
Sure,
off.
I got you.
And the fascists usually catch you before you get across the border, and then they throw you into camps. And that's where, listen, obviously this is a very narrow slice of that, but
Do you think companies will move because of this?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you think Charles Payne will move because?
Yeah,
of it?
why not?
You know what? There might be the 3 people that Adam and Ben talked about might be okay with it. You know, you never know what the mindset is. But ultimately, to Emily's point, we've seen this on a broader picture. Remember, Barack Obama was ushered into office because of evil corporate America and all the money they made. Consequently, his platform dealt with this kind of stuff, and look what we got for it. The worst recovery in the history, a sluggish economy, stagnated wages. I mean, so we already see it's a social experiment
Charles,
that failed on a national level big time. Consequently, we're rejecting the notion that somehow there was unfettered regulations and the rich people were too rich.
But hold on.
By electing someone worth $10 billion who says, I love being rich.
No, but we should be able to have a policy conversation about this. We're not talking about Bill Gates, who started a company. We're talking about, like, how much are you comfortable with? How much is enough for government to do?
Then answer that question. How much is enough?
Government or society? I mean, Adam, I'm just saying we've already gone through this experiment for the last 8 years, and I think everyone can agree it's a
If Starbucks were in Portland, it would have to move out because the outgoing CEO, the guy who wants to retire, makes like 10,000 times his lowest paid worker. So Starbucks wouldn't be able to do business.
I don't know if his annual compensation is 10,000 times.
Adam, let's be real clear here. If we're going to talk statistics,
well, Schultz will make it $1.
Right. We're talking statistics about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. I mean, the gap grew, I believe, under President Obama. Dramatically.
Under Republican and Democratic presidents alike.
Well, I think it was pretty large this time.
I understand that, but I don't know if you rectify it by slapping a tax on the CEO of a company because he or she earns too much compared to their lowest paid workers, because by that definition, you'd have to move them all out of California, right?
Well, what we don't want is to try to achieve...
Go ahead, Ben.
I'm sorry, are you calling on me? Or...
Yes, I'm fine.
What we don't want is to try to achieve equality by harming the rich. We want to try to achieve it or something towards it by improving the lot of the non-rich. You do not get to have a better society by making the rich poorer. You get it by making the poor richer. And that's exactly the opposite of what Portland's trying to do. But Portland is a wacky place, and I don't even know what to say about Portland. It's so strange.
There goes that Portland demo. All right, guys, I want to thank you very, very much. Stock's on a record run, of course, since the election, and now the president-elect is revealing that he sold shares back in June. Now, he told me he sold them all a lot longer back than that. And now suddenly it's an issue. Because he's missing his own rally, or because the media is resenting his name is on it? Trump sold his entire stock portfolio long before the election and before the record-breaking rally after the election, and they're questioning why he didn't say anything sooner. But it is not the first time Mr. Trump got out of this market. This is what he told me 2 years ago.
I'm not a stock person, but a long time ago, about 3 years ago, when I saw what was happening with money and certainly how little you get on CDs, I invested very heavily in the stock market, and I feel like a great genius. But I sold a few months ago. I just said I'm getting out because I don't have confidence in our leadership, and we'll see what happens.
I thought my toupee was a lot better back then, but that's just me. All right, so Charles, I don't know why this is such a big deal. Whether it was 6 months ago, 2 years ago, he's out. You could argue that he missed the rally because of it, but whatever. It doesn't matter.
I'm so confused about this. I mean, I can't believe this was a question this week. I hope you do, Adam, because honestly, I think it's irrelevant, particularly when Congress has made millions of dollars with legal insider trading. Perhaps the liberal media would like to look into that.
No, you didn't. Okay, very good point there. Adam, try to pick up that.
It's not about the media being upset about it being called the Trump rally. It's part of this larger conversation about his conflicts of interest.
Is this a Trump rally?
And the media is doing its job.
Do you think it's a Trump rally right now? What's going on? This surge in the market.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, you just defeated your own cause. All right, Gaswell.
There is zero conflict, I believe, in the stock stuff. I think this is a tempest in the teapot. Listen, he should have held his portfolio. Is there a conflict? Yeah. If he's running his businesses out of the White House, or if he's delegating to his kids and they're somehow benefiting him, that's where the conflict is. The media is just like, they're trying to throw everything at the poor guy.
Well, they seem to be going nowhere,
the poor
Emily,
guy,
they were going nowhere on going after his businesses and disentangling himself. So they thought maybe if we could time these bashings of companies to maybe the fact that you own shares or shorted shares, right, he removes that possibility. If it's true, what he says. Is it an issue, though, at all to you?
So I agree with the point that the media, there are questions to be asked. They need to ask the right questions. Keep in mind, barely over 50% of Americans own stock themselves. This is not something that matters to the American people. They want to know how he's going to win their jobs back. They loved what he did with Carrier.
Be careful about that. That's on base there. All right. Now, Ben Stein-Conley, your thoughts on this?
No, it's great that he sold it. He shouldn't have stocks at all. He's in a position to influence the stock market very much every day, every tweet. He should not have stocks at all. People in his state, his family should not have stocks at all. I think he's done the right thing by selling it. And I don't think, by the way, there's ever been any reports that he was ever a short seller. So I think
that's
we can
a good point.
That out.
Well, actually, that is a very good point. All right. I want to thank Emily. Good to see her in the flesh. Hope to get her back, although she's already told me, never again. Not if you put me next to Gasparino. I want to thank Charlie Gasparino as well. All right, well, Donald Trump may be selling, but our guys have the stocks that they say you should be buying. Credit to them. Donald Trump's out, but our guys say these stocks should keep you in, as in the money. Charles Payne.
I like PACCAR, the parent company of Kenworth and Peterbilt. Classic commercial trucks all the way.
Adam.
Consumer discretionary ETF for a wide variety of reasons. We're heading into a bullish holiday season. This is how to play it.
The Trump bull market, I guess. All right, Ben.
Don't buy sweaters for your wife or your spouse or your anybody. Buy diamonds. Diamonds are the way to go for now and for the immediate future and for the long-term future and forever.
Wow. All right. I'd like to see just Ben Stein shopping. All right. We continue now, Dave.
President-elect Donald Trump still getting bashed by the establishment for his congratulatory phone call with Taiwan's president. Take a listen.
Some of the progress that we have made in our relationship with China could be undermined by this issue flaring up.
I don't want to undermine that progress, but someone here asks, where was the outrage when our current president spoke with Cuba's Raul Castro and when he reportedly spoke in secret with Iran's leader, Rouhani? Do they have a point? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus to find out with Mr. Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Mike Ozanian, Elizabeth McDonald, John Tamny, and Bruce Jackson. Well, Steve, I can't help but laugh when I hear all the progress that we made with China. Well, what about the progress with the South China Sea business, with trade, et cetera? I don't think it was bad. Do you?
No, and in fact, it was absolutely a brilliant move. By the way, liberals love to deal with our enemies, and that's why they say it's bad to be an enemy of the U.S., worse to be an ally of the U.S. And in this case, what Trump did was absolutely fabulous. He made it very clear we're going to defend our interests in the South China Sea, cybersecurity, barring our companies from having full selling rights in China, especially if they're cutting edge. And then he follows up by appointing Terry Branstad, governor of Iowa, the new ambassador to China, who knows President Xi of China. So in effect, what Trump is saying, we'll negotiate with you, but it can be very different from what you've had in the past from us.
And Bruce, what was all that progress that Josh Earnest was talking about that Trump is now in danger?
Listen, I think that my issue is the phone call isn't that big of a deal to me, but I would say that there's 54% of the American electorate, and the votes are still being counted, it's growing, that are still have concerns about Donald's temperament here. And so when he goes off and he does this and takes a call, and then he tweets later that, like, they called me, I mean, it just doesn't send a message that he knows what he's doing or that there's a game plan. And so that's my concern, because he just goes off half-cocked on all these things, and I don't really see a game plan here. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it turns out.
Well, Rich, some people say it was a plan all along, that this was not that spontaneous, that Trump had planned to do this from the beginning. But he does have a game plan concerning money and our commercial interests with Taiwan. Here's what he sent a tweet out saying, it's interesting how the U.S. sells Taiwan billions of dollars of military equipment, but I shouldn't accept a congratulatory phone call. Does he have a point?
Not only does he have a point, the logic of that is so brilliant and crystal clear. You know, I didn't vote for the guy. I've been critical of the guy. I thought this was brilliant. A lot of my liberal friends on Facebook thought it was brilliant. Trump is a master negotiator, and he knows that the U.S. has leverage with China right now. You know, China desperately needs the U.S. economy to keep its growth rates up and its middle class growing, and Trump is going to use that leverage.
And Mike Ozanian, Josh Earnest didn't spell out, I don't think he could spell out the progress that supposedly we've made with China, but Trump spelled out in another tweet some of the problems we've had with China. He says, did China ask us if it was okay to devalue their currency, making it hard for our companies to compete, heavily tax our products going into their country, the U.S. doesn't tax them, or to build a massive military complex in the middle of the South China Sea? I don't think so.
Well, I think what China probably was most upset about was Donald Trump's indiscretion. But as China and the rest of the world are learning, is that the president-elect speaks his mind. How refreshing is that, David? Someone that tells the truth. And the people that are concerned about his behavior, they're the same people who said that when he ran, he would never get the Republican nomination, and then once he got it, he would never beat Hillary Clinton. Right. They were wrong on both of those counts, and they're wrong here.
John Tamny, I know Trump is not Reagan and Reagan is not Trump, but there's a similarity in the sense that a lot of times Reagan appeared to be speaking undiplomatically, according to the diplomatic experts, so-called experts, and yet he got things done.
Well, Reagan at least mostly knew that devaluation isn't the path to prosperity.
I knew you were going to take issue with that part of the tweet. Go ahead.
Somehow Trump still believes that. But my main thing is that I don't have an opinion on China versus Taiwan, but I certainly don't think our president should be placating either side. The reality is people in China, people in Taiwan invest in each other aggressively. There's not going to be a conflict. It's not President Trump's job to deal with what is a local issue.
And Emac, talk about placating. Think of the way this administration placated Castro, both when Fidel was alive as well. The way they've dealt with the Iranian dictatorship, and it's just not working, that old diplomatic method.
Yeah, that was the moral failure of the Obama presidency. Just the refusal to basically say evil is wrong and say that countries like Cuba or Iran brutalizing and slaughtering their own people, that's wrong. And Donald Trump is doing that. He's speaking with moral clarity. And, you know, by the way, we also had, remember Secretary of State John Kerry was saying about the Charlie Hebdo attacks? You could see some rationale in that. Yeah. I mean, now we have a leader who's saying, you know what, this is right, this is wrong. And I think Rich and Mike are absolutely right. I mean, that was, I do again say that is President Obama's greatest failure, is his refusal to hate and condemn evil.
Now, Steve, he has picked these diplomats to operate with the world in the various forms and everything. They're kind of, some of them are from the establishment figure. Is he going to take charge? Is he really going to shape up the diplomatic community, shake it up in ways we haven't seen since Reagan?
I think he's going to be very forthright in terms of what our interests are and then pursue them. Again, pointing Terry Branstad, former governor of Iowa, who knows Xi in China as a negotiator, tells the Chinese things are going to change, but we're willing to deal with you. And we'll profit if we cut good deals with each other. Mm-hmm. But this idea that they can cut American companies off from selling in China, steal our know-how and technology, and not pay a price for it, that's got to close. That's got to end.
And, Bruce, I'm going to try to get it out from you again, just talking about what the Obama administration did diplomatically. I mean, the reset did nothing. The Russian reset that Hillary did with that target button and everything, it did nothing to stop the Russians from going into Crimea, from invading a foreign country and taking it over. It did nothing to stop China from moving into the South China Sea. It doesn't seem to have worked.
Well, I would say this there's been a lot of ambiguity with China dating for decades here, so maybe there can be some clarity here. But I would say Trump didn't get this idea to call Taiwan on his own. Bob Dole, the former Republican presidential nominee, set this up. He was a paid lobbyist for the Taiwanese people on this, and that's how that came about. So much for draining the swamp.
Well, that's an interesting charge. Steve, had you heard that charge before, and is there any credence to it?
Sure, Bob Dole was instrumental in making it happen, but my answer is, so what? If he makes something good happen, you grab it. If it's not good, you ignore it. Just because somebody may think they have something in it doesn't mean you should reject it. That's good judgment.
Rich, I'm laughing because it kind of reminds me of when Hillary charged Trump with taking advantage of tax write-offs and so forth. He said, yeah, it proves I'm smart.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of bluntness you get. Look, Steve Forbes and I just came back from our Forbes Global CEO Conference in Jakarta, and I am telling you, Americans should go there because, you know, the other countries in Asia really want a strong U.S. Yeah. And so they may not come out and say so publicly because of the fear of offending China, but they are giving a quiet thumbs up.
I just want to go back to Steve for a second, because he did just come back from Asia. And Steve, you were one of the first people to tell me during the campaign that the Chinese, the people that Trump was attacking time and again, actually were okay with the idea of his becoming president. Right?
They feel they can cut a deal with him, negotiate with him, and I think he's demonstrating that with a real clarity.
Yeah,
and then, by the way, the Chinese, in reality, are less upset than the New York Times.
Well, exactly. And here's why. I mean, China needs the United States more than the U.S. needs China.
Bingo.
I mean, we are their #1 export market.
Although I saw John Tamny shaking his head. Go ahead, John.
Well, it's got to be, of course, China needs the U.S. as an export market, but let's not forget how much better off our economy is because we have such productive people in China making all sorts of goods for us so that we can focus on our energies on much more higher margin goods. This works for both sides. It's not a negotiation. It's not war.
Got the last word in there, John. Thank you very much. Coming up next, Republicans plan to delay replacing Obamacare, coming under fire, but our Steve Forbes says he has the cure for everybody without a delay, and it puts you, the consumer, in charge. He'll explain. Coming next.
I'm Greg Jarrett. Now back to Forbes on Fox.
Dire reports this week from hospital and insurer groups on a Republican plan to delay replacing Obamacare. But, Steve, you say the remedy is just to get rid of all the middlemen, insurers, and the government, and make the patient the customer again. Explain.
Sure, David. Whenever we have real free markets, scarcity's always turned into abundance. Prices always come down. Why not with health care? You see it with LASIK surgery for the eyes, where the customer, you don't have that disconnect between doctors and patients. You see it in cosmetic surgery. So how about having hospitals post prices for all their products and services? How about hospitals posting each month how many patients die from infections received after they're admitted to the hospital? 90,000 a year. David, there's a surgery center in Oklahoma called the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, and their prices are low. They bundle. They're public about it. They don't take insurance. They're so good that now the state of Oklahoma's having its own employees go to them because they're so cheap and effective.
Bruce, really the point is that you put as little distance between the patient and the provider as possible, but now we have all the middlemen. And by the way, life expectancy for the first time in a long time is going down in the U.S. All kinds of increases from various diseases. As Steve mentioned, some of the hospitals are getting dirty. Don't we just want to shrink the middlemen, get the middlemen out of the business?
Well, I would be for, which would never happen, the Bernie Sanders idea of single payer, which would get rid of all the middlemen known as insurance companies. But
yeah,
that's
but
not
it
going to
put
happen.
a big middleman in the middle known as the government. I mean, that's the middleman there. Go ahead.
Well, no, but I would say that one of the things that Obamacare, and even the president didn't talk enough about this, is it moves the system away from fee-for-service medicine to value-based care, which does put the patient at the center, where you're not just treating people once they get into the hospital. We heard at the Forbes Healthcare Summit last week where Humana has 10,000 nurses, where you're moving the providers more out into the community to get people and stay well before they get sick and in the hospital, which is a worry of the hospital industry.
It is a worry. But, Mike, the point is that health care is a service. The Obamacare wanted to make it something else, some government right or something. But it's a service like all other services. And if the customer has more choices, the customer's better off.
Yeah, to me, David, there's no mystery with health care. There's nothing that distinguishes it from, say, food or sneakers or anything else that you buy. It should be a decision based on the customer. And, you know, it's extremely personal. You know, what doctor I want to see, what type of treatment I want. It's much more personal than anything else. So the more control I have, the more I'm going to feel comfortable with it.
But, Rich, let's talk about this very interesting kind of coalition between establishment types inside the Beltway, including Republicans, working with insurers and hospitals, coming out with a study saying it's going to cost $165 billion if we get rid of Obamacare too soon. Frankly, this is ridiculous to me. I mean, the sooner the better, I think, if something's not working.
Well, I think you have to disrupt the existing order, and particularly, you know, when many of these hospitals are not behaving professionally, as Steve points out, and are not being transparent about prices and about infection rates. But I have some sympathy for them, because if you take away Obamacare, you're simply going to get people crowding emergency rooms, and the hospitals are left dealing with this.
Yeah. But, John, the point is that Obamacare has been taking us in exactly the wrong direction. If you want to get out the middleman between the customer, the patient, and the provider, that means that you give the customer more say over his own money. That's what flexible spending was all about, when, in fact, Obamacare cut flexible spending from $5,000 down to $2,500.
Absolutely. When free people are venture buyers, high prices fall. The first ballpoint pen cost $15. Now it doesn't. The first laser printer costs $17,000. My problem with the Republicans is stop coming up with solutions and just repeal Obamacare. Once you do that and just allow competition into what is a service like any other, you will see prices fall because those who provide the service will come in and compete on price.
And you'll also see less abuse and fraud, because when people are in charge of their own money, Sabrina, they're much more careful about how it's spent. By the way, Medicare, just one major government healthcare enterprise alone, weighs $60 billion a year because the individual doesn't have control over it.
Right. I mean, I think that the central goal in all of this is to give individuals more ownership and control over their health care dollars. To Mike's point, the way we have control over our food dollars and our clothing dollars, to sort of respond to some of the progressive concerns. I think one of the reasons there was this big push for universal coverage was because they felt that people weren't going to a doctor soon enough. But if we repeal Obamacare, it means that insurance would go back to being what insurance was originally intended for catastrophic things, not for your daily or your routine visit to the doctor. So we're all going to have to sort of reset the way we think about insurance, and this will be much better for everyone.
All right, the Cash It In gang getting ready to roll at the bottom of the hour. Eric, what do you got?
Hey, David, President-elect Donald Trump bashes Boeing over the sky-high cost of the new Air Force One. Then the mainstream media warns he's scaring companies, but is that a good thing? Plus, Ohio State University students and faculty saying, don't call the recent attack on campus terrorism, even though the attacker praised the terrorist leader. What? See you at 11:30.
Wow, Eric, we will be watching that one. Thank you. But up here first, all the major stock indices soaring since the election, hitting lifetime highs this week. But some in the media saying it's not a Trump rally at all. It's an Obama rally. We report, you decide. Coming next.
Stocks a lift. It's actually been the highest average annual stock market return for, I think, any president in history. In fact, and I'm hoping this is a coincidence, those three presidents just mentioned all ended in crashes of epic proportions. Maybe periods of deregulation lead to speculation and financial euphoria that takes markets to levels so high they ultimately crash. I'm going to say that's a coincidence. But look, financial regulations in general do not exist to pump stock prices up. Okay? They're trying to help lift people up, and hopefully the good ones don't destroy companies. If you let Waste Management just dump everything in the river and the ocean like the old days, it would help their stock price, right? That doesn't mean it's a good to get rid of that regulation that prevents you from putting paint in the rivers.
But
like
you've had regulators overstepping, Jonas. You've had them, these are regulations that are held up in the courts because, well, they look illegal.
There's a lot of regulations, and some of them are bad. It doesn't mean all of them are bad. It doesn't mean getting rid of all of them was going to be magically good for both people and stocks. Again, it's pretty easy to make stock prices go up by getting rid of regulations. That's true. That doesn't mean everybody's welfare improves because you do it. The good regulations help everybody, even the companies. They like some regulations if it prevents, destroying the environment in some cases, if it prevents competition in a bad way, prevents other foreign companies. So I'm just saying you got to look at each one individually.
Some Democrats have been bashing Trump for picking wealthy CEOs to serve in his cabinet. Let's just say he disagrees. Listen to this.
And, by the way, some of the people I put on to negotiate, you've been noticing, are some of the most successful people in the world. And one newspaper criticized me. Why can't they have people of modest means? Because I want people that made a fortune. Because now they're negotiating with you. Okay?
Yeah, rich is bad, John.
Yeah, look, if I want to learn how to hit a baseball, I don't want to talk to some professor who's never been in a batter box, who's written a theory of baseball and has no practical experience. I want Wade Boggs to teach me, one of the greatest hitters in baseball, to teach me how to hit a baseball. You look at Linda McMahon. I worked for Linda. I worked for the WWE. Right. Linda started a small business on the verge of bankruptcy, mortgaged her own home with Vince to create WrestleMania, and she created a business that's worth $1.5 billion, a global conglomerate. If you want somebody that is going to be head of the Small Business Administration like Linda McMahon is, that is exactly who I want. Not somebody who's written some goofy theory about business that has no practical experience.
Yeah, I want broke failures as the cabinet picks, Gary B.
Well, exactly. Look, if you go back to the Constitutional Convention, the Founding Fathers, you go through them, there was a lot of common people, but the bulk of them were very successful, very rich, certainly compared to the common citizen then. George Washington was very wealthy at the time. Thomas Jefferson, very wealthy. Ben Franklin, very, very successful, very wealthy, able to retire early. These are the kind of people, they were the shining stars of our early democracy. That's the kind. Now, I think that what Trump is hiring now are the shining stars of this new generation.
Okay, you know what? Yes, you want bright, successful people. Trump might be more influenced by financial success than just being smart. And I will say, there's like the billionaires like Michael Bloomberg who look out for the interests of everybody yet know how to run a business. And then there's rich people like the Italian Silvio Berlusconi who just are rich and look out for their own interests and their friends' interests. And that doesn't always benefit or make for a good politician. So you don't want just average Joes running the government. That's not going to work either. But just a billionaire class looking out for their interests is also a flawed system. But we still have kings and royalty running the government.
There's nobody named Sir or Prince who's in the cabinet that we know of, Jonas. So thank you. Thanks, guys.
No, but I mean,
go ahead, Jessica.
I think that's actually an excellent point. I have no problem with it. And I think most people have no problem with someone who's, been successful and in the industry or within the business in a positive way, who's now going to be coming in and working in a cabinet position. But when you have people that are sort of hand-selected because they are wealthy and cronies, and someone who's, for instance, is up for Secretary of Education, who has no actual experience in public education, who hasn't worked in the system, who hasn't gone to public education, who hasn't had children in public education, it makes it
very specific.
No, except for the fact. So I think that is the concern.
Jessica,
I mean, that's the concern people
wealthy
have.
Individuals who bring a wealth of experience to the table. You need to bring in people who know what they're doing and who know what's going on and how to handle things.
That's got to be the final word. Thanks, guys. Cavuto on Business about 20 minutes from now. Neil, what have you got?
Hey, Dagan, the Fox Business interview that created a firestorm. This union boss telling me that he is taking issue with President-elect Trump taking credit for saving jobs at Carrier. Now the president-elect is firing back. Plus, liberal lawmakers out west passing a new CEO tax to combat what they say is income inequality. But are they really putting all American jobs and their pay in danger? We'll see you at the bottom of the hour.
Thanks, Neil. We can't wait. But up here first, as Congress squabbles over another spending bill, did President-elect Trump just find where he can cut tens of billions in spending on day one?
Live from America's News headquarters, hello, I'm Greg Jarrett. Congress narrowly avoiding a government shutdown last night after Senate Democrats caved on a bill to fund the government through April of next year. That measure passing with less than an hour to go before the midnight deadline. Red state Democrats were trying to tack on health care benefits for retired coal miners. Ultimately, that attempt failed. Also overnight, the White House deploying an additional 200 U.S. Special Forces to help fight ISIS in Syria. Defense Secretary Ash Carter says the troops will help train and equip local fighters in the push to retake the militants' de facto capital of Raqqa. This latest increase will bring the total number of American troops on the ground in Syria to roughly 500. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now back to Bulls and Bears. And for all your headlines, be sure to log on to foxnews.com.
Congress battling over another spending bill this week as a new report claims Pentagon officials buried a study exposing $125 billion of wasteful spending. Gary B., you saw this as a great place for our next president to start cutting on day one.
Oh my gosh, Dagan, it would be so easy. If we said in the first block, the greatest government job is a government job, or the greatest job to have is a government job, because every department keeps growing. Just two quick examples. In 1935, the government started a rural electrification service to bring electricity to the heartland. I think after 80 years, we've kind of accomplished that, but the department lives on at the tune of about $9.6 billion a year. We have sugar subsidies that put a minimum of the floor of double the average world price. That costs us $1.2 billion a year. Just take an axe to these programs, and you'd save enough to probably cure the debt in just a few years.
Janine, this report that came out is just indicative of the level of waste in agency after agency, department after department.
It's deplorable, and it's no secret that government wastes money. That's the only thing that government is really good at doing, is wasting our hard-earned tax dollars. But I hate to see and imagine what the real waste and abuse that is going on across the board in all of the agencies. I think Donald Trump is assembling a team of experienced people who will help cut the wasteful spending, get our country back on track, reduce the debt, reduce the spending. That's what our country really needs today to turn our economy around and to get people employed. That is really important.
Yeah, and speaking of employed, Jonas, this amount of money, $125 billion, would employ 50 brigades.
It's not chump change, but I'll tell you, and I think Gary's been on the defense waste more than anybody on this show for a long time, and because I disagree with how all the departments are the same, because ultimately what's going on at the Pentagon, what's going on, let's say, Social Security pales in comparison, because there's not as much bureaucracy, and Social Security just moves money around. There's waste and fraud, and people ripping them off, but there's actual infrastructure bureaucracy at the Pentagon, hiring people, contractors, building planes, listening to presentations, getting shows, there's too many employees there for there not to be massive amounts of waste. A lot of programs are just shuffling money around. And again, there's waste there as well, but don't think across the board it's this percentage. It's always been the Pentagon. It's always been the $99 hammers and toilet seats. This story goes back forever, and that's where you need someone with business experience to go in there and run it like a business and not like just this thing that no one's a touch because they're getting jobs in their district, et cetera, et cetera.
Jessica, a businessman and not a bureaucrat. Imagine that.
Well, I mean, that's all well and good, but one of the main premises that Trump ran on was reinvesting in defense and how much our defense has been weakened. And yes, there is fraud and abuse and waste within government agencies like there are with any large, even corporations. These are things that have to be overseen. But to say that there's a general all government agencies are bad or don't help us and that all they do is waste is not true. If Trump can come in and continue to change things, I mean, this is now the military-industrial complex that has been going on, as Jonas just said, for decades and decades and decades, and make some changes and still, get the armor and the cars and the helmets that our military who are serving need, and get rid of a lot of these other programs. I mean, that's the main problem.
Well, John, you know what? It's about reallocation of money, right? So you've got a logistics department in defense that's bigger than UPS. So again, it's where do you want to spend that money?
Yeah, you have a logistics department that's 457,000 people, bigger than what you mentioned, the UPS Global, who delivers parcels all over the world. You got 1 million people that are in back chains that support 1.3 million soldiers. But look, it's not necessarily the Pentagon's fault. It's Congress' fault. They are the problem. Look at the M1 tank. General Odierno says we don't need any more tanks. There's 2,000 sitting in the desert in California right now. But because it's part of supply chains in all these congressional districts, we're still building tanks. That's not the Pentagon's fault. That are crooks in D.C., that are our Congress, that are trying to get reelected, that are doing things just to create jobs for no reason.
Thank you, John, and thanks, everybody. Cashing in just over an hour from now. Eric, what do you guys have coming up?
Hi, Dagan. Our next president taking on more companies, this time Boeing, over the cost of the new Air Force One. The media saying it's scaring corporate America, but is that exactly what we need in America? Plus, Democrat lawmakers demanding Trump pay for his own security at his New York residence. So why didn't they complain about the security at the Vice President Joe Biden's private home? The Cashing In, see you at 11:30.
Thanks, Eric. We'll be watching. But up here first, that new spending bill in Congress offering $300 million to aid refugees, but on one condition: they can't come to the U.S. Is that fair? A fair
Sandals today.
To protect our country from terrorism extremism, we will suspend immigration from regions where it cannot be safely processed or vetted.
Our next president still promising to block refugees from places we can't completely vet. And now Congress is offering $300 million to help the refugee crisis, with one major caveat: that money cannot be used to bring refugees to the United States. Deneen, is this a good way to help them over there while protecting us here?
Yeah, you listen, we have a refugee crisis on hand, but we also have a national security crisis here in our country. I say Americans should be taken care of first and foremost.
John?
Yes. Look, we're talking about flying 10,000 refugees over here. The money well spent when you're talking about actually helping people, instead of going over there and getting them, flying over here and vetting them, is taking that money. We can help a multiple of that number. There's about 11 to 12 million totally displaced or homeless people in Syria right now, and helping them with their refugee camps and their migration into other parts of Europe. We'll help so many more people, and it'll be so much more economical beneficial.
Gary B.
I think it's flushing $300 million down the toilet. If we don't want terrorists to come, let's use the money to strengthen our borders, to strengthen our intelligence. Normally with these things, basically what you're doing is you're flying over Syria with a bucket loads of money. You're letting it drop and you go, analysis, I'm betting the State Department goes through with this. It's a complete waste of money, in my opinion.
But, Jessica, we are a benevolent society. We're a benevolent nation, and that's why we do this.
Well, and we have responsibility, on a global level. We are the leaders of the world, and we do outreach programs. We have since even after World War I, World War II. We particularly help refugees in war-torn area conflicts that we are involved in as well. The thing is that, sadly, I think this is another one of those instances where this money would have been spent anyway. They just put in this language to say, oh, it's not going to bring these refugees over. But that was never the original intent of the money. I don't think this is where the money was going. It's sort of one of those things Congress does to make it look like they're doing something that they're not.
If you have an existential threat like Hitler taking over a whole, you have to take more refugees, certainly more than we did in World War II. But when you have dictators and you're looking for the most bang for your buck, not what feels the best for your people, then your dollars are going to do better helping more numbers of people in these regions.
Thanks, Jonas. And thanks, Janine and Jessica, both ladies, for joining us today.
Thank you.
If you're busting your holiday spending budget, you're not alone. More Americans say they're doing it. Now get the gift to help pay for all those gifts. And then some. Predictions, Gary B. Go.
Taken after the Italian referendum, people are worried about Italy. I am not. By EWI, the ETF that tracks Italian companies, up 20% in the next 12 months.
Lenny, John, prediction.
Corporate tax cut, infrastructure spending, I think that benefits stocks like Home Depot. I own it. I think it's up 20% a year.
Jonas.
Shoppers say they're going to spend a lot more money than last year, which means no coal and stockings and, unfortunately, no gold because Trump is ruining the gold bubble. Short gold DZZ up 30% in a year.
I'll take some gold, though. Neil is now.